What if I told you that the true story of the Age of Splendor was written not in glittering ballrooms, but in cramped rooms under the roof, where the lights never went out? You cannot even imagine how many unshed tears and secrets were absorbed by these cold walls, which became the only refuge for thousands of women. Behind the grand facades of mansions decorated with marble and gold lay a completely different world, invisible to guests and hosts alike. It was a world of shadows, rustling sounds, and endless service, where a person could be deprived not only of their freedom, but also of their own name. In these houses, luxury coexisted with asceticism, and the sparkle of the mistress's diamonds was paid for by years of loneliness for her maid. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn what a terrible vow of silence was taken by those who knew more about their masters than their own husbands. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the system broke people's personalities from the moment they first stepped through the door of a wealthy home? When a young girl entered service, she was often forced to leave her most precious possession behind, her real name, given to her by her parents at baptism. It was inconvenient for the mistresses to remember new names every time the servants changed, so all the maids were often called by the same name. These could be simple, faceless names, such as Mary or Sarah, which were passed from one girl to another, like an old apron. A person's identity was erased, turning a living woman with her feelings and dreams into a simple function, a convenient tool of everyday life. It was the first and most cruel reminder that here you no longer belong to yourself. Even their clothing, austere and dark, was designed to blend in with the interior, drawing no attention to their figures or faces. This artificial depersonalization created an insurmountable gulf between the inhabitants of the upper and lower floors. Women were turned into pieces of furniture that could be rearranged or replaced if they broke. But behind this mask of indifference and submission lay living souls, full of suppressed emotions and unspoken grievances. Deprived of a voice, these women learned to express themselves through glances, through subtle gestures that only they themselves understood. They created their own world inside a stranger's house, where they preserved the crumbs of their identity. In their tiny rooms, they kept letters from home, faded ribbons, and small souvenirs that reminded them of who they really were. It was a quiet, invisible resistance to a system that tried to turn them into obedient robots. Every evening, when they took off their uniforms, they regained their true selves, at least for a few hours of sleep. The strict hierarchy of servants was no less complex and oppressive than the etiquette of high society. Newcomers had to endure not only the contempt of their masters, but also the strict morals of the senior servants, who jealously guarded their position. Housekeepers and butlers ruled this lower world with iron severity, demanding impeccable obedience. Any mistake, any hint of individuality could cost them their job, and the recommendation without which it was impossible to find new work. The fear of ending up on the street forced them to endure humiliation and forget their pride. It was a school of survival where every day was a test of endurance. But the memory of who they were lived on in rare letters home and quiet prayers before bed. These women bore their cross with remarkable dignity, finding meaning in the flawless performance of their duties. They were the foundation on which the entire splendor of the era rested, although no one noticed the cracks in that foundation. Their fates are a story of invisible feats of patience and humility. And every time we look at old photographs of luxurious interiors, it is worth remembering the shadows behind the scenes. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on losing one's name. Do you think modern society could accept such rules of completely renouncing one's own identity for the sake of work? Write about it in the comments. What if I showed you a place where luxury suddenly ended, as if cut off with a knife, giving way to harsh reality? There was a clear boundary between the world of masters and the world of servants, often marked by a narrow, steep staircase leading to the upper floors. This black staircase was not just an architectural element, but a symbol of social division, a portal between paradise and purgatory. The steps here were not covered with soft carpets, and the walls were devoid of paintings and wallpaper, often painted in plain gray or brown. Climbing it after an exhausting day, the women felt every step echoing with pain in their tired legs. It was a path they traveled dozens of times a day, carrying heavy jugs of water, coal or stacks of clean laundry. The servants' quarters, located under the roof or in the basement, were strikingly different from the spacious rooms of the masters. In winter, drafts blew through the cracks in the old window frames, and the temperature barely rose above freezing. In summer, under the hot roof, the air became heavy and stuffy, turning rest into torture. These rooms often had no fireplaces, or they were too small to warm the frozen walls. Women slept under thin blankets, huddling together or wrapping themselves in their own shawls to retain what little warmth they had. Waking up in the morning in an icy room required tremendous willpower. Light penetrated sparingly, and in the evenings it was necessary to burn dim candles or oil lamps. In this dim light, hours of rest were spent mending clothes or talking quietly. The feeling of isolation from the world grew stronger with each day spent within these walls. Despite the poor conditions, the maids tried to keep their rooms perfectly clean and tidy. This was not only a requirement of the housekeeper, but also a way to preserve human dignity in inhuman conditions. They decorated the walls with newspaper clippings, cheap postcards, or dried flowers. A small mirror on the wall, often cracked, was the only witness to their fading youth. These pitiful attempts to create comfort spoke of women's indestructible craving for beauty. It was in these cold rooms under the roof that a special sisterhood of women united by a common fate was formed. Here they shared secrets, cared for each other during illnesses, and comforted each other in times of grief. These walls heard the most sincere prayers and saw the most bitter tears, hidden from prying eyes. The attic became a fortress where they could be themselves, taking off their mask of submission. But even these modest refugees did not truly belong to them. At any moment, the mistress or housekeeper could come in to check, rummage through their belongings, and find forbidden items. The feeling of complete vulnerability and dependence never left them for a moment. Are you ready to find out what secret items the women kept under their mattresses, risking being banished forever? What experts keep quiet about often turns out to be the most important element of history, which cannot be found in official documents. Within the walls of wealthy homes, there was an unwritten law, the violation of which was punished more severely than stealing a silver spoon. It was a law of absolute silence about what happened behind the closed doors of the master's bedrooms. Maids, especially personal chambermaids, became unwitting witnesses to the most intimate and dark dramas of their masters. They saw what was hidden from the eyes of society, traces of tears, bruises covered with powder, and the cold alienation of spouses. Sometimes this silence was bought with gifts, an old dress, small change, or a rare day off. But more often it was maintained by fear and a strange, distorted loyalty to their mistress. Seeing the suffering of the mistress, the maid often felt sympathy for her, understanding that a golden cage is still a cage. Female solidarity arose despite class barriers, but it always remained silent. They were allies in a man's world, but allies without a voice. There were cases when maids knew about illegitimate children who were secretly sent to the countryside to be raised. They helped hide pregnancies by tightening corsets to the last minute and arranging trips to the waters to treat imaginary illnesses. These secrets bound the maid and her mistress more tightly than any official contract. Such knowledge gave them a certain power, but to use it was deadly dangerous. Blackmail could end in prison, and loyalty guaranteed nothing but a roof over their heads. The burden of other people's secrets left its mark on the psyche of these women. They became distrustful, withdrawn, and suspicious. Seeing the underside of a beautiful life, they often lost faith in love and marriage, preferring loneliness to deception. The experiences of others became a vaccine against their own illusions. They grew old, keeping in their memory the archives of scandals of an entire era. And when an old maid died, secrets that could destroy the most distinguished families in the city went with her to the grave. They took these secrets with them as their last service to their masters, faithful to the code until the very end. The history of the Gilded Age is written in official biographies, but the real truth remained untold in the cramped rooms of the servants. Like if you think such loyalty deserves respect, even if it was forced. The secret that will change your life is understanding that a maid's perfect appearance was the result of a daily physical feat. The uniform was not just clothing, but a symbol of the status of the house, and an instrument of discipline. The morning began with the tightening of the corset. Stiff, cheap, often poorly fitted, cutting into the body and leaving red scars on the sides. Unlike the silk corsets of the mistresses, the maid's underwear was made of coarse cotton and whalebone, designed for durability rather than comfort. They had to spend 14 to 16 hours in this armor, doing hard physical work, bending over, washing floors, carrying heavy buckets of coal and water, lifting mattresses. All this had to be done while encased in a rigid frame. The corset restricted movement, prevented deep breathing, and compressed the ribs, causing constant dull pain in the back and abdomen. But removing it or even loosening it during the day was strictly forbidden by the rules of propriety. A maid's untidy appearance was perceived as a personal insult to the mistress and disrespect for the house. A straight back was a duty, even if the spine was ready to crumble from fatigue. A white starched apron and cap were the main attributes of a maid, her calling card. They had to be crisp with cleanliness and whiteness, creating the illusion of sterility and order. But maintaining this whiteness in a house heated by coal and lit by oil lamps was a real art. The slightest speck of soot or grease was instantly noticeable and punished with a reprimand. Starched collars rubbed the neck until it bled, but these wounds had to be hidden without showing any pain. But even in these conditions, women found ways to express their individuality. A special way of tying apron ribbons, inconspicuous embroidery on a handkerchief hidden in a pocket, a tiny medallion under a dress. These were small rebellions against the system, attempts to preserve a part of themselves. They took pride in their neatness, turning the wearing of uniforms into a matter of professional honor. The ability to look impeccable at the end of a hard day was considered a sign of the highest skill. Constantly wearing a uniform blurred the lines between work and personal time. Even during their rare hours of rest at home, they often remained in their work clothes, ready to respond to a call at any moment. This created the feeling that the service never ended, that they were always on duty. Their bodies got used to the constant pressure of the fabric, and without the corset, they felt strangely unprotected. The uniform became a second skin fused with their souls. These clothes were armor that protected them from the outside world, but they were also prison garb. They gave them a place in life, a piece of bread, and a roof over their heads, but took away their freedom and ease of being. The corset kept their back straight but prevented them from breathing deeply. And therein lay the main paradox of their existence: external perfection at the cost of internal pain. In the next chapter, you will learn how the morning began for those who ensured this perfection, while their masters were still fast asleep. The day in the house began long before the sun touched the roofs of the city. At 4 or 5 in the morning, in complete darkness, the maids were already up. The first sound in the house was not the ringing of an alarm clock, but the rustling of matches and the creaking of stove dampers. The kitchen stove was the heart of the house, a huge cast iron monster that had to be fed with coal and awakened so that the water would be hot and the food ready for breakfast. It was dirty, hard work, raking out yesterday's ashes, bringing in buckets of coal, stoking the flames until your eyes watered from the acrid smoke. Every room required attention. Heavy curtains had to be opened to air out the rooms, but not so much that they would get completely cold. She had to collect and clean the shoes left by the owners at the doors, polishing them to a mirror shine by the dim light of a candle. It was a race against time, an invisible marathon, where the finish line was the awakening of the masters. If the owner came down to the cold dining room, it was considered a disaster and an unforgivable oversight. Water was another enemy and friend. Before the water supply was installed on the upper floors, every liter of hot water for the owners to wash had to be carried by hand. Heavy copper or porcelain jugs of boiling water were carried up the steep stairs in an endless stream. The muscles in their arms and backs ached from the constant strain, but they could not stop. The mistress's bathtub had to be filled and perfectly warm by the time she woke up. Breakfast for the servants themselves was quick and meager. Often it was yesterday's porridge, a piece of bread, and weak tea swallowed on the go. There was simply no time to sit down and relax. The energy they got from this food was burned up in the first few hours of work. A feeling of chronic sleep deprivation and slight hunger was a familiar backdrop to their lives. By the time the first bell rang in the master's bedroom, the maids were already falling off their feet from exhaustion, Even though the day was just beginning for their masters, they had to greet their employers fresh, neat, and ready to serve. The invisible morning shift ended and the day shift began, full of new worries and demands. And no one ever thanked them for keeping the house warm. The fire crackled merrily in the fireplaces, creating a cozy atmosphere. But only the maids knew the true price of that comfort. Every flame was paid for with their sweat, their early rising, and their worn knees. The house came alive thanks to the vitality they put into every stone and every object. It was a daily sacrifice to the god of the hearth. Are you ready for the shocking truth that these women did not even have the right to their own thoughts? The symbol of the master's absolute power over the time and lives of their servants was a system of bells. In every room, by the bed, by the armchair in the bathroom, there was a cord or a button connected by wire to the kitchen or the servants' quarters. There on the wall hung a row of numbered bells, each with its own tone. This sound could ring out at any moment, during the day, at night, during dinner, or during a rare moment of rest, and it demanded an immediate response, an unconditional Pavlovian reflex. The ringing of the bell meant that you had to drop everything you were doing and run. It didn't matter if you were doing laundry, writing a letter to your mother, or just trying to catch your breath. It was impossible to ignore the call. A delay of even a minute would provoke anger and reprimands. Life turned into a constant wait for the signal, a state of perpetual anxiety. The nervous system was stretched tight as a string, reacting to every rustle that sounded like the ringing of metal. Night calls were especially painful. Just as the exhausted girl was falling asleep, a sharp ringing would tear her from her slumber. She had to throw on a dress in the dark, light a candle, and run upstairs, up the cold stairs, often just to close a window or bring a handkerchief. Her sleep was fitful, interrupted, and restless. Chronic sleep deprivation was the norm, leading to exhaustion and premature aging. Hatred for this sound built up over the years. In the memoirs of former servants, one often finds references to how they dreamed that these damn bells would break or fall silent forever. It was the sound of slavery, a sound that reminded you that you did not belong to yourself. Even after being dismissed or retiring, many would shudder when they heard a similar ringing in the street. It was a psychological trauma ingrained in their subconscious. Sometimes, in moments of quiet rebellion, servants would plug the bell's clapper with paper or pretend not to hear it. But this was a huge risk. If the deception was discovered, punishment was inevitable. So most often they just sighed, straightened their aprons, and went to the call, hiding their irritation behind a professional smile. The bell was the connecting thread between two worlds, but that thread was like a noose. It provided comfort to some at the expense of others. It was the most eloquent symbol of inequality in that era. But if the bell took away their working time, what was left for their personal lives? In the next chapter, you will learn why love was strictly forbidden for them. A maid's personal life was a territory to which she had no right. In most wealthy homes, there was a strict rule: no followers. Followers meant suitors, fiancés, or simply men who showed interest. The mistresses believed that love and family would distract the girl from her direct duties. A maid had to be married to the house, giving it all her energy and devotion. If a girl had a lover, she had to meet him secretly, in snatches, on her rare days off. Bringing a man into the house was strictly forbidden. Love became something shameful, hidden, a crime against the employer. The fear of being caught poisoned even the brightest moments. A walk in the park, a short conversation at the back door, that was all they could afford. Marriage for a maid almost always meant the end of her career. As soon as a woman got married, she had to leave her job, as it was believed that her duty now was to serve her husband. This presented women with a cruel choice: either a stable job, a roof over their heads, and a full stomach, or love, family, and most likely poverty. Many chose the former, sacrificing their happiness as women for the sake of security. Of course, romances did happen, often within the servant staff itself: a footman and a maid, a cook and a gardener. These unions were more understandable and sometimes tolerated if they did not interfere with work. But even here, there were pitfalls. If a couple decided to marry, they often had to look for work as a couple, which was much more difficult. or leave a good home for the unknown. In their rare hours of leisure, women read cheap romance novels, imagining themselves in the place of the heroines. It was a surrogate for feelings, a safe way to experience emotions that they were deprived of in reality. They dreamed of a prince who would take them away from that kitchen, but princes married the daughters of their masters. Reality was harsh and prosaic. The ban on personal life even extended to the expression of emotions. A maid could not cry because of a quarrel with her beloved, could not look sad or pensive. She had to be even-tempered, friendly, and easygoing. No one was interested in her inner world or her tragedies. She was a machine for creating comfort, and machines do not have broken hearts. This systematic suppression of natural human needs crippled souls. Women became hardened, cynical, or, conversely, turned to religious fanaticism. Unspent love turned into bitterness, and only at night, in their pillows, could they allow themselves to be weak and dream of the impossible, of their own home, where they would be mistresses, not servants. The mistress's personal maid, the chambermaid, occupied a special place in the hierarchy. She was the elite, the aristocracy among the servants, but also the most dependent position. The chambermaid was her mistress's shadow, her mirror, and her most reliable safe. She knew more about her mistress's body than her husband did. Every wrinkle, every scar, every imperfection hidden under the corset and layers of clothing. This physical closeness created a strange, almost unnatural intimacy. The ritual of dressing and undressing, combing hair before bed, brought the two women from different worlds closer together. In these moments of silence, when the socialite's mask fell away, the mistress could open up, complain, cry. The maid listened, nodded, comforted, but always remembered her place. It was not a friendship between equals. At any moment, the mistress could change her mood from kindness to anger and remind her of the distance between them. The maid lived her mistress's life, often completely dissolving into it. She wore her dresses, adopted her manners, gestures, and even intonations. She was proud of her mistress's successes at balls, as if they were her own, for it was her hands that had created this image. Her mistress's beauty was her professional achievement. But this identification was a trap. By losing herself, she became only a pale copy of another person. French women or women who claimed to be refined often became chambermaids. They demanded special treatment, a separate room, and food from the master's table. Cooks and ordinary maids hated them, considering them upstarts. Wars in the kitchen over that bimbo were commonplace, but they had to put up with it because the mistress herself stood behind the chambermaid. This role required not only the skills of a seamstress and hairdresser, but also the skills of a psychologist and diplomat, knowing when to hand her a handkerchief, when to disappear, when to pay her a compliment. It was a life spent on tiptoes, a life spent in whispers. Being indispensable but invisible, that was the highest art of a lady's maid. And yet, looking in the mirror while her mistress tried on diamonds, the lady's maid saw her own reflection there. Tired but proud, she knew that without her, this glittering image would crumble to dust. She was the invisible framework that held up the grandeur of a society lady. What awaited these women at the end of their journey? It was the most frightening question that haunted every maid. Old age in the Victorian era and the Gilded Age did not bode well for those who had no savings and no family, and servants rarely had either. They gave their whole lives to someone else's home, but that home did not belong to them. And when their hands began to tremble and their eyesight began to fail, they became useless ballast. Some, the more fortunate ones, were able to save a small amount of money and rent a room in a poor neighborhood, living out their days on a pittance. They would gather together, former maids and cooks, and reminisce about the former grandeur of the houses where they had served. They spoke of their employers as if they were relatives, proud of their successes and saddened by their downfalls. This was their only wealth, their involvement in the bright lives of others. Sometimes old nannies or housekeepers were kept in the house. Out of mercy, they were given a corner to live in and fed, but they felt like freeloaders, poor relatives. They saw young, strong, bold people coming to take their place, and it was bitter. Being a living monument to the past in a house that was striving toward the future was a difficult fate. These fates reflected all the cruelty of the capitalist world of that era. People were resources that were squeezed dry and discarded. No social guarantees, no rights, only duty and service. And even in old age, they continued to serve mentally, unable to imagine themselves outside the hierarchy. But there were also bright stories. When the grown-up pupils did not forget their nannies, they bought them houses and visited them. These were rare examples of humanity that became legends. They were whispered about as if they were miracles. And Mr. Charles's nanny bequeathed him her Bible, and he cried at her funeral. The old age of a maid is a quiet finale without applause, a retreat into the shadows, a final dissolution into nothingness. They left, leaving behind only polished floors and embroidered napkins that would outlive them by 100 years. What remains of a person who has spent their entire life trying to be invisible? After a maid's death, her entire material legacy often fit into a small chest or shoebox tucked under the bed. Inside were not gold or stocks, but treasures of a different kind. Fragments of memory, fragments of other people's lives that had become her own. These were artifacts of an emotional history that no one would ever write down in textbooks. There you could find yellowed photographs of the owners, often stolen or given away in a moment of generosity. On the back, dates and names were signed with a trembling hand. Master William, 5 years old. Lady Anne on her wedding day. These pictures were proof of involvement, evidence that this woman was there. She saw this happiness. She held this child's hand. This was her surrogate family. In the boxes lay scraps of letters, ribbons from bouquets from balls, menus from festive dinners. Trinkets that the masters threw away without a second glance became relics for the maid. A dried flower could remind her of the day when her master smiled at her and said a kind word. A button from a uniform. A secret love that remained a dream. It was a museum of unrequited feelings and glimpses of beauty. Today, historians eagerly search for these shoeboxes, for it is in them that real living history is hidden. Not the history of kings and generals, but the history of everyday life, the history of feelings, the history of women in a world of men and money. These modest things cry out that every life matters, even if it was spent on the back stairs. We look at these artifacts with a poignant sense of guilt and gratitude. Guilt that society ignored these people for so long, and gratitude for their quiet feet, which preserved the aesthetics of the past for us. They did not build these palaces, but they breathed life into them. The next time you find yourself in a museum estate or watching a film about that era, remember this box under the bed. It contains the heart of the house. It contains a secret that has not been forgotten as long as memory lives on. We have opened a door to a world that has long remained in the shadow of ceremonial portraits and historical chronicles. The servants' quarters, cold attics, and cramped kitchens were not just decorations, but a stage on which millions of dramas were played out. Quiet, inconspicuous, but no less poignant for that. The women who lived there gave their strength, their youth, and their dreams to maintain the illusion of a perfect world for others. Their sacrifice was the price of the splendor we still admire today. Which of the stories of these invisible heroines touched you the most? Was it the loss of their own names, the prohibition of love, or old age in solitude? Share your thoughts in the comments. It is very important for us to know your opinion. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that together we can uncover new secrets of the past that are not usually spoken about aloud.